To the surprise of no one, so-called campus bias response teams are now morphing into powerful and coercive tools in the progressive battle against free speech on college campuses. Next on Campus Roundup. Hi, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Campus Roundup at The College Fix. Our top story segment this week considers the question of campus bias or left-wing insanity. To discuss the extent to which so-called campus bias response teams have become little more than progressive censorship police, we welcome Arissa Damron, an English major at Yale University and a journalist for The College Fix. Arissa, you recently wrote a very interesting article for The Fix entitled "College Encourages Students to Report Signs Color-Coded Either Pink for Girls or Blue for Boys as a Bias Incident." Tell us a little bit at Williams College in Massachusetts. Tell us a little bit what the bias reporting process is at Williams College.
Right. So through the Speak Up Diversity Initiative at Williams College, they've established an online form where Williams students, faculties, and other people on campus can log in and log these bias incident reports that they see on campus. These forms ask for your name, when you saw the incident, to describe the incident, if you know who said this bias speech, and then how it made you feel, a date, etc. And you can either check yes or no to include it on a larger database of these incidents.
Well, it's remarkable to me that this is, as you pointed out, a diversity initiative. What in the world does genuine diversity require this kind of interfering administrative action to sort of weed out comments? What do you think is going on here? How does diversity link with this kind of speech police?
I think this is an example of the university trying to step in and say that they know better than their students. They're trying to say our students are not brave enough, are not smart enough, are not confident enough to address these issues on their own, to say, hey, that joke was offensive, and to actually have this dialogue. And so they're stepping in order to allow for greater diversity of people, but less diversity of thought.
I think that's a wonderful point. Greater diversity of rather topical diversity, right? Skin color, sexuality, gender, that sort of thing, but much less freedom for people to speak their minds. Is this really something that happened, or is this a worst case scenario that the university is trying to head off? Do we really have color-coded signs across campus where they identify as girls with pink and boys with blue, or is this something that some faculty administrator doesn't like on their own when they see it in the popular culture, that they're now using this platform they have to try to crack down on students using it?
As far as I can tell through my investigation, there have been no reported bias incidents using color-coded signs, though Williams will not share their database of bias incidents reported with outside individuals not from Williams. However, the few bias incidents reported in their college newspaper have been mostly racially insensitive drawings and comments.
What are some of the other, besides the color coding, what are some of the other issues that the statement that came out from Williams College said they're going to try to crack down on? What other incidents that they list that go along with that?
Other incidents they list on this example sheet include excluding others for whatever reason, telling stereotypical jokes, appropriating culture, though they don't define that, and things like that.
Well, aren't you excluding others? If somebody wants to dress their little girl in pink or wants to suggest that blue is a color for boys, aren't you excluding them?
Exactly, but it's a bias incident nonetheless.
Right, and the university is going to investigate it. And now, in all of your research, you have not been able to find out what happens. What happens once a complaint like this enters the process at Williams?
So once you fill out the form, it goes to a committee composed of students and faculty alike. But after that, it's really unclear what happens. There's not necessarily a kangaroo court or tribunal that you go to. There's no necessary repercussions, though police have been involved in bias incidents in the past, especially those racially insensitive drawings and comments. But as far as I can tell, no police reports were filed, no students were expelled, anything like that. It's very unclear if they could be punished within the college, by faculty, etc.
Well, one thing I can tell you for sure from my experience on college campuses as a professor is these things end up in your permanent file. Every silly complaint, even if there's no basis for it, even if the university itself ultimately refuses to even investigate it, as a student or a faculty member or even an administrator, this becomes part of your permanent university file. So if enough of these things add up, even if they all mean nothing individually, collectively they can make a case for it. Now, you were on campus back in 2015 at Yale, certainly, when the infamous Halloween Halloween controversy arose. Tell us what happened on Yale's campus then.
Like at Williams, the administrators felt the need to preemptively strike on potential bias incidents and sent out an email warning students against racially insensitive costumes, telling them that there was a support network there for them should they see them. And a brave faculty member, Erica Christakis, spoke out saying, Yale students are smart enough to know better, to police their own behavior, to police their own costumes. And she was berated and forced out of the university.
So one very courageous, liberal, and she was very liberal, right? This was not some right-wing conservative professor. So a very liberal, very engaged professor on campus. Her students loved her. She had great student evaluations. But simply for daring to challenge the Yale bias response team in their preemptive attack on Yale students about Halloween, she was literally driven from the college. Is that typical of what's going on in Yale? And is that something that is representative of the student body as a whole? Or is this just a small group of really motivated students who are responsible for this?
At Yale, we have a good, annual protest. People get mad about grad student hunger strikes for unionization and changing the name of Calhoun College and things like that. But it's a small but mighty group of a lot of the same individuals getting active over the different things. So I wouldn't say it's representative of the entire population because there's a lot of apathy here at Yale, but there is a small but mighty protest culture who will be at every protest, at every rally, everything that they need to get done on campus for varying degrees of issue.
Arissa, I'm grateful for your time today. I want to give you the last word. What can you tell students who might find themselves in the crosshairs of this kind of investigation? What can you tell people on campus, kids, about how to navigate this on campus?
I really advise students to be confident in their own actions and to know how to have these discussions about what is and is not correct to say on campus among themselves and really police their own behavior and not feel the need to go to administrators for the final say. We're adults. We're going to be citizens of the world, and we need to start acting like it.
Well said. Arissa Dameron of Yale University, thank you for your time. To hear more from student reporters like Arissa, follow the College Fix on Twitter and Facebook. It's time now for Campus Talk, our weekly discussion with members of the College Fix editorial team. Today I'm joined by College Fix assistant editor Daniel Payne for a conversation about the broader implications of the campus bias reporting phenomenon. Daniel, you've been reporting on this. You've seen this in the news for a long time now. Give me a sense from your perspective. What drives universities to come up with these sort of Orwellian ways to censor kids' speech?
Yeah, what you've seen over the past few years is this increase in campus organizations and tribunals and committees that are designed to really sort of manufacture what they call bias incidents, where none really existed before. So, in addition to maybe actual incidents of real antagonism that you might find on campus, you'll have folks brought before these tribunals, for instance, for color coding a sign blue for boys or pink for girls. That has actually become an incident that can be prosecuted on a few campuses across the country. That's what you're kind of seeing is this drive to make just about everything that a student could possibly do something that could offend somebody else and could thus be punished in some way. And you really, I think you see that impulse because they want to enforce this ideology. They're very interested in blanketing their campus with this political correctness, and they're really eager to find any way they can to do it. And it turns out that creating bias response teams and making everything into a bias incident is a really effective way to do that.
I love the word that you used, manufactured. This is completely manufactured. No longer are universities allowing kids to speak and then dealing with the 1 in a million incident where somebody has a genuine offense. What they're doing now is they are proactively trying to come up with all sorts of ways to tamp down speech. We've seen it not just with speech, but these absurd freedom squares, right? These little blocks of places on college campuses where you have free speech that for 1 hour a day, for this little part of the quad, you're allowed to speak your mind. Although there's always a campus policeman standing right by to make sure you don't speak it too much. Well, from the perspective of being a student in education, education. I'm an educator. This really does cast a pall over any kind of free discussion in classroom. It casts a pall over the kind of books as a professor I can assign. If I'm assigning books that stereotype gender now, that deal with gender from a traditionally male-female perspective, then I'm already in the possibly in the middle of a hate crime. What do you see happening if we don't get a handle on this? And what can we do as faculty, as students, to begin to push back about this out-of-control administrations?
Well, yeah, and I can speak personally, too. In my own days as a student, which wasn't that long ago, I certainly felt nervous speaking up about things that under any other context would be considered non-controversial. Everything that I might say in class, I had to stop and think, is this going to offend somebody? Does this go against, progressive gender norms and that kind of thing? So you do see it really having a stifling effect on not just controversial topics, but everyday, run-of-the-mill things that people used to talk about with no concern. And I think that the way that I've become convinced over the years that the way to push back against this is to be really unapologetic about it. To not preface normal, inoffensive things with trigger warnings and apologies for whether or not this might offend somebody, but just talk, to be respectful and kind and considerate, but to be honest and open and be willing to engage in productive and sometimes difficult dialogue. To not back down from the student mobs and the bias response teams and every other thing that is designed to stifle speech. If you really kind of put your best foot forward and refuse to be silenced by this kind of machine, I think that's what's really going to turn the tide on this, because I think once they do start getting pushback, they're not going to know what to do.
I think that's a great point. It is. Certainly in the faculty and certainly in the student body, there is a very small but very vocal group of administrators and students who are constantly pushing this kind of thing. I always thought a nice thing that could be done as well is turn the tables on the hate crime reporting, the bias reporting. I mean, the fact that the people who are putting out these laws and rules are using words like patriarchy, which is completely a stereotype, using words like white privilege, right, which stereotypes. The argument is that we have to have these bias response teams to crack down on stereotypical labeling of people, of refusing to acknowledge people as anything other than the collective. That's exactly what these bias response teams are doing to begin with. They are guilty before the fact the minute they start to engage in this kind of behavior.
Yeah, I think, and holding up that mirror would probably confuse a significant number of them to the point that they might just give up, because you do see among the ranks of these crusaders on campus a great deal of really kind of repugnant bias in their own right. So if you can actually turn the tables on them and sort of bamboozle them with their own silly ideology, that's probably a pretty productive track, I would imagine.
If we don't get a handle on this, if we don't take a common sense approach and fight back and get the students to be more comfortable speaking their minds, not less comfortable, where do you think this might go? What would be the next phase? We've seen over the last 20 years this it started with the creation of these passive committees who just simply listen to students, to now activist committees that are trying to root out problems that haven't happened yet. If we're not careful, what's the next step?
I think the next step is this steadily grows and gains more influence in the wider world and not just campus. I mean, you've seen the sort of diversity craze that really started on our college campuses. It's expanded to corporate America. It's expanded to television, to even sports television. It's really grown out of the campus and into the larger culture and economy. And I think that if this keeps getting worse, you are going to see more draconian things like bias response teams and like these mobs really gain more of a toehold off of campus and into the real world, so to speak. So I think rolling back that sort of apparatus is important, not just for colleges, but for everything else as well.
Daniel Payne, assistant editor at the College Fix. Thanks very much for your time today. And be sure to stay up upon all the latest news and information from the College Fix editors by joining us on our social media platforms. One of the most alarming trends reported in numerous articles covered by the College Fix is the rise of campus bias response teams, shadowy committees of faculty, administrators, and even on occasion students. Despite the questionable need for and the dubious legal provenance of such administrative overreach, more and more colleges and universities are encouraging students to report incidences of injustice, bigotry, political difference, or even hurt feelings to committees that immediately begin wide-ranging investigations that may go somewhere or may not. Nobody can really say for sure. These bias response teams possess vaguely defined and creepily Orwellian powers, and in almost every case, they have no clear or transparent set of guidelines, objectives, or boundaries. And predictably, what began as a routine administrative follow-up to a filed complaint is now becoming a proactive tool for preemptively stifling freedom of speech and association on campuses across the country. So what then is the fix? One thing that all bias response teams have in common is the stated desire of stamping out campus stereotyping, scapegoating, and bias generalizations about individuals and cultures. But as with all such academic initiatives, the definitions of such evils are those posited exclusively by progressives. It never dawns on the typical academic, floating in the intoxicating bubble of ideologically monolithic committees designed to promote social justice, that slurs such as patriarchy, white privilege, toxic masculinity, the 1%, and even white male are all nothing more than generalizations and stereotypes designed to scapegoat broad swaths of the population. I imagine these bias response teams would not have a moment's peace if conservative, Republican, Christian, or other out-of-favor students simply reported every example of such slurs as they occur in classes during the course of a typical college day. Beyond administratively overwhelming these corrupt and unaccountable systems, university administrators and faculty would also be, theoretically, forced to confront both their own hypocrisy and the very nature of what words like bias actually mean. Another chance for students to finally teach their teachers. And that's the final fix. I'm Dr. Duke. For more videos and original articles, visit thecollegefix.com. And don't forget to like The College Fix on Facebook and follow on Twitter to receive your daily dose of right-minded news and commentary from across the nation.